Hey guys, welcome to another one of my live streams. This time we are live streaming from my room at Mass General. I have been here since Christmas Day. The day after Christmas, I had my gallbladder out. A surgery the gastric surgeons unanimously agreed was a bad idea because I might not survive it. Well, they were right. I had a cardiac arrest in the PACU right after my surgery. I suspend my DNI, do not resuscitate, do not intubate for all surgeries so that the surgeons will operate on me. But when I coded, it wasn't in the OR, it was in the post anesthesia care unit. So it was a gray area. They called my mom to find out what to do. She said to intubate me and do everything they could to get me back. So here I am, back to was I ever normal. We last left Cassie after she had weighed herself and realized she had hit triple digits for the first time in her life. In her search for diet pills, she found a bottle of Advil and prescribed herself about 12 of them. We'll begin reading here. I didn't die. My parents came home with my cousins. They were laughing and joking and teasing each other. So I dug up a fake smile and also acted like everything was fine. My parents and I packed up all of our suitcases during the next couple of hours. You have to weigh the bags. You can't have any of your bags weigh more than 50 pounds or you get charged more, explained my cousins. Then we went into the bathroom and pulled out that evil scale so we could take turns weighing our bags. I had a stare down with that devil of a scale that had ruined my vacation. It took everything in me to fight the urge to step on it again, but instead heaved my suitcase onto it. This big hefty piece of luggage was less than half my weight. That disgusted me. I almost forgot that I had taken all that Advil, but on the drive to the Ben Gurion airport in Tel Aviv, waves of wooziness began washing over me. It was a little scary, but I didn't say anything. Otherwise, I still felt fine as I boarded the plane alongside my parents. At that point, if the Advil was building up to the toxic levels in my system, it was going to kill me because we were miles high in the sky on a 12-hour flight across the ocean. But once I drank a few sips of ice cold seltzer water from the cart they brought around, I started to feel a little better. By the time we landed, I was back to baseline. Hang on, sorry guys. I got to adjust. I got these mother of a load of heart monitor leads coming up my chest, and they're driving me insane. And then I've got all my IV lines on top of that. And then next to my bed, I've got my IV pole. So I'm kind of hindered here. But I'm all right. No one ever realized that I had tried to kill myself with my cousin's Advil, so I never said anything. Back at home, I was still fat and miserable. And now that we weren't on vacation, I didn't quite know what to do with myself. I could tell Anne and Christine noticed my weight gain. They didn't say anything about it to me, though. They didn't want to feed my eating disorder. But my eating disorder was attempting to devour me. I rode my bike a lot and chanted, "I will lose weight. I will burn more calories. I will get skinny. Chanting this in my head while I rode my bike made me ride harder, longer, faster. When I had my monthly appointment with Dr. Kimmons, she never brought up the weight gain. I never mentioned it to her. You're at a healthy weight for your height and age. Don't worry about the weight gain. I promise you, you're not overweight, she told me. Maybe according to her charts, I wasn't overweight, but according to me, I was beyond obese. Let's put this down. Dr. Kimmons decided to do some blood work because it had been over 2 months since my last set of labs. She pulled out a pink slip and with lots of boxes on it and checked off a bunch of the boxes, then sent us to the lab. I didn't mind the stick of the needle. After the blood work, I left with my mom and didn't think twice about what the results would be. When the lab called back to talk to my mom, they had disturbing news. My blood sugar had skyrocketed and was now dangerously high. Dr. Kimmons made an emergency appointment with us. I went over this with your psychiatrist, and she agrees with me. We think it's your new psych med, the Zyprexa, that shot up your blood sugar. We need to take you off it immediately. Zyprexa causes spikes and drops of blood sugar and was probably messing with you your whole vacation, Dr. Kimmons explained. It's probably part of the reason you gained so much weight so fast in Israel. Being on prednisone was a big factor as well, she added in offhand. Relief came through me like a flood of water. After a drought, I was so happy that my legs wobbled. So I wasn't just a big fat pig. I hoped that the weight would peel off quickly. Stopping the evil Zyprexa seemed like a great idea. Stopping the Zyprexa did help my weight drop. I lost about 10 pounds and went back into the double digits. It took about 2 weeks for the first signs of Fellingham to return. When I heard his familiar voice in my ear, a chill ran down my spine, and I felt like I had just been deflated. My worry was that things would completely unravel again. I tried mentioning him to my DBT therapist, hoping she could help me deal with voices that I was now able to recognize as hallucinations most of the time. My therapist listened and then changed the subject. I should have known better than to think she could help. Kids started to stare and even occasionally laugh at me. They asked questions. Why does your hair look like that? Don't you ever wash it? I did wash it, just not every week. Okay, that sounds gross. But I was too scared to be in the shower. I was paranoid that the eyes in the walls were watching me while I was naked. Also, it was hard to remember to shower when you spent most of your energy just trying to stay grounded in reality. Aren't you paying attention? People would sometimes ask. When a blank look came over my face, I was trying to pay attention, but it's hard when you're hearing voices from two different realities, both at the same time. And I was forever fabricating excuses for why I had forgotten to do this or that. I was really spacey a lot of the time. I contemplated jumping in front of a car, but that wouldn't be fair to the driver of the car. The driver would forever feel guilty for my death. I contemplated falling out of a window. The idea was a viable option in my mind. I decided to hold off a little and see if things got better or worse. I was thinking again. In school, I was no longer doing so well. I was getting an incomplete math class and missing a lot of work in other classes. Again, I started spending more and more time waiting in the hallway near the guidance offices, hoping one of the counselors would come out and talk to me and somehow give me magical advice that would fix everything. Usually, I ended up waiting for over an hour before I would give up and go back to class. One day, Fellingham's shrieking got the better of me. I hid myself in the stall of the girls' bathroom and pleaded for him to just stop. Finally, I resorted to the only thing I could think of. I bit my arm really hard, so hard that it drew blood, so hard that it left a red bruise in the shape of a hand, in the shape of my mouth. Then I crashed my head around the wall of the stall and beat myself so hard I got dizzy. Fellingham's shrieks grew quieter. I pulled the sleeve of my shirt down over the bite and went to the guidance office. One of the counselors was in there. I just couldn't get words to come out of my mouth, so I just pulled up my sleeve and showed him the bite mark I'd inflicted on myself. When he asked me if I'd done it to myself, I nodded, and then I cried and cried. He handed me a tissue and called my dad. My dad came to pick me up. The counselor told my dad about the bite. My dad just nodded. We didn't speak the whole way home. My paranoia was worse too. I was constantly afraid people were staring at me, plotting against me, and following me around. I decided that the waitress at Friendly's was being so slow because she had heard from a woman I'd passed on the street that I was talking to myself. I almost left without paying because I was so scared that the waitress was calling 911 on me. When she came with the bill, I couldn't look her in the eye. The waitress was calling 911 on me when she came with my bill. I didn't look her in the eye and left as fast as possible. I started cutting again. I left the voice. I left when When she came with my bill, I didn't look her in the eye and left as fast as possible. I started cutting again. It made the voices quieter. It made them easier to deal with. I would cut my upper legs, stomach, and chest so that no one would find the cuts. Some of the cuts went deep. I knew they would scar me, but I didn't care. They always stopped bleeding after a while. Then one day, my mom left me home alone with a can opener and a can of olives. I opened the can of olives and was eating a few when Fellingham started screaming. Without thinking about it too much, I opened the can and threw the lid in the trash. Then I took it with me I fished the can lid out of the trash and took it with me into the bathroom. It had a jagged edge to it. I dug the edge into my skin and gave myself a few deep cuts under my chest. Then the can lid slipped out of my hand and onto the floor. I didn't even feel the pain, but I did see the blood. Hi, Purple Leaf. I'm reading an excerpt from Was I Ever Normal, which is a book I published. Hang on. This is the book I'm reading from. This is the book I published. Was I Ever Normal? This is the back of it. And I'm reading chapter 32 of it. It's available at Barnes & Noble, Amazon, Books A Million, Google, Kindle, Nook, and a bunch of bookstores all over the world, in all over the US and international. You can find it pretty much everywhere. You can find the book pretty much everywhere. It's in chain bookstores and it's in individual bookstores. That's this book, Was I Ever Normal, by Becca Pava. And that's me, Becca Pava. You can see me on the back. I look a little different because I have glasses in that picture that are different than my glasses now. Anyway, I'll finish reading. I didn't even feel the pain, but I did see the blood dripping rapidly down the sink. The blood turned into a stream, flowing into the white porcelain. At first, I couldn't locate where the bleeding was coming from. I looked down at my exposed chest. The bleeding was slowing in the cuts. I wasn't bleeding this heavily from my chest. As I moved around, I saw blood drizzling onto the floor. No, scratch that. It was coming down in a torrential downpour. That's when I found the source. There was an inch-long gash from my pointer finger on my right hand. The can lid had caught on my skin and dragged through it. Bringing my hand over the sink, I looked closer at the cut. I could tell right away that it was deeper than any other gash I'd ever slashed into my body before in my entire life. The fear and panic I felt at that moment had nothing to do with worries or blood loss or nerve injury or stopping the blood flow or even calling for help. My first thoughts were of covering up the reason I had the lid of a can of olives in the bathroom with me. As I walked out of the bathroom, I left a trail of blood splattered along the floor and the white walls. I left the can lid in the sink. I cleaned up the blood-splattered hall and covered my finger with tissues. The problem was that I kept bleeding through the tissues. That was when I started worrying and realized this was beyond something a band-aid was able to cover up. When I looked closely at my finger, I could see bone under the flesh. The reason I called it my grandpa was so I stopped making a mess, not because I wanted help making the bleeding stop. I actually didn't want the bleeding to stop, because as soon as the blood starts splattering everywhere, the bad man, storyteller, and chorus stepped back. My head was quiet, my breathing slowed. Besides, I felt kind of relieved that everything on my secret laden insides was all pouring out into clear, open air. Dialing my grandparents' number turned out to be quite the task. I tried to use with a finger that was gushing blood. I tried to use my left hand as I held my right finger in a tightly paper toweled fist. My voice shook a little when I said hi to my grandpa. "How's my Cassie?" asked my grandpa, just like always. I, I'm okay, but I think I might need stitches." "What happened? Where are you hurt?" I could hear the concern in my grandpa's voice, and was brought back to the night he had tried to stop the paramedics from taking me to the hospital. Then there had been annoyance in his voice, no worry. He didn't he didn't spring into action, rub my back, or tell me that everything was going to be okay. Now that I had a physical emergency, his voice was full of concern. I could hear the sound of him pulling on his boots, grabbing his car keys, and heading out the door. Once again, I was forced to wonder why people could understand a person's physical wounds, but at the same time not comprehend their emotional wounds. They were often a million times worse than the physical ones. No time for those thoughts, though. I was rapidly bleeding through the now crimson paper towel clump swathed around my injured finger. I cut my finger. So far, I hadn't had to lie at all, and I wouldn't as long as he didn't ask how it got cut. I couldn't very well explain that I had hurt myself while trying to hurt myself. It wouldn't make sense to anyone except for me and the creepy voices who knew me all too well. "How did you cut it?" Grandpa asked, just like I was afraid he would. I struggled to think of a reason, while desperately trying to staunch the blood that continued to flow out my finger through the paper towels on the kitchen counter that I was standing next to in rapid crimson droplets. I was trying to open a can of olives and the lid slipped out my finger and cut me. My lie opened up guilt deep inside me, but I was more concerned at the moment about the finger that the can lid had opened up almost 15 minutes ago. "I'll be right over. Keep your finger above your chest and try to keep pressure on the cut," Grandpa instructed me. His years as a pharmacist gave him some knowledge over the inner workings of the human body and how to treat illnesses and recommend first aid products. He had even been a medic in the Korean War, where he had produced penicillin throat drops for all the soldiers that were getting sick. After hanging up, I returned to the bathroom and wrapped some more paper towels around the finger. I'd given up on band-aids. I was beyond the need for band-aids, and had been for a while now. Grandpa got to the house quickly. He only lived a mile away after all. It only took him a moment to survey the situation then spring into action. First, he taped gauze around the finger. Then, he wrapped it in a dish towel. Then, he instructed me to hold my finger above my heart, keeping pressure on it. When I read through both the gauze and the dish towel, Grandpa had me try and put my finger under cold water. Well, when all the cold water did was turn red from my blood, we tried wrapping the finger up again with gauze. Another towel didn't work. We put my finger back under cold water. We must have alternated between both methods for at least an hour. In between switching methods, Grandpa worked to clean up the blood. He knew, but as I knew all too well, cleaning up mess after mess doesn't solve the underlying problem. It just allows the problem to continue longer and longer. My mom came home around 3 in the afternoon. She took one look at the mess and my filleted finger, gushing crazy amounts of blood, before she proclaimed that I needed stitches and needed them now. Grandpa agreed. He had exhausted all of his options. My mom took me to an urgent care clinic downtown. We won't have to wait as long there as we would at an ER, my mom explained to me, as she rewrapped my finger in a paper towel and grabbed an extra roll to take as backup. In the car, my mom asked me how the injury had happened. I repeated my story about the can lid slipping when I was removing it from the lid of olives. Guilt nibbled at me from the inside, but I was too ashamed of myself and too scared of my mom's reaction to tell her how it had really happened. At the urgent care clinic, they took one look at my finger and led me through the doors into one of the exam rooms. The doctor numbed my finger, and then 4 stitches later, it had stopped bleeding. The doctor also asked how it had happened. I repeated the story of the slipping can lid and then prayed that the truth would stay hidden. My mom took me home with a numb finger and a throbbing guilt. I didn't even tell Anne and Christine the real way my finger had gotten sliced open to the bone, and I told them everything. If I really thought about it, the finger incident had been an accident. I had been trying to cut my chest and stomach. I hadn't taken the lid to my finger and purposely attempted to slice through it. So I wasn't really lying when I said it was an accident. The lid had slipped, so my story about it slipping wasn't exactly untrue. It just wasn't the whole truth. I liked looking at my injured finger. The stitches stayed in for a week. I had to keep them covered with a tube of white gauze that slid over my whole finger and kept it protected. I liked privately peeling up the gauze covering and looking at the stitches that lay underneath. Part of me wished I'd done it to myself on purpose, because then it would feel like I had power. It takes a lot of inner power to transform a normal looking finger to a Frankenstein's finger. That's what I had taken to referring it to as. It was my Frankenstein finger. That's why, with the wiry black stitches and pale puckered skin, it really looked like it belonged to a monster, and even felt like a monster. It was good that my insides now matched my outsides. Sometimes when the voices were trying to make me feel like I was a nothing, like I was a nobody, I would look at the finger and pretend I really had purposely done it. Then I would feel a bad sense of control, a surge of power, and the voices would quiet ever so slightly in respect and awe that I could destroy my body almost as well as they could destroy my mind. When I returned to the clinic, when I returned to the clinic to get my stitches removed, I felt a sense of loss. Felt weird to have the string slid out from under my skin. It felt sad to lose the stitches that had been binding my finger together. I briefly wondered if I could borrow some black wiry thread from the clinic and use it to stitch back together the pieces of my mind and life that felt fractured and out of place. The skin had healed nicely where the stitches had been. Now it was nothing more than another scar, telling the story of all the pain that had haunted my life. I had lines of scars on my legs from where I had cut. I had lines of scars on my chest from where I had cut. I had lines of scars on my stomach from where I had cut. I had lines of scars in nice little lines that didn't heal as nicely, as neatly or easily as any of the other scars I had. And that is the end of A Frankenstein Feeling. No, I don't need to go to sleep. I wanted to read the whole chapter. What did you think of it, Purple Leaf? Normally I read better, but I've been sick. A cardiac arrest didn't attack you, and I haven't quite been myself since then. I can put a trigger warning on this for sure, yeah. Any questions, comments, anything? Nothing? No questions or comments? Does anyone have any questions or comments? I guess I'll end the stream now then, if no one has any questions or comments. Purple Leaf, do you have any questions or comments? Do you want to check out my book on Amazon? I know this wasn't the best reading, but I really wanted to do this reading. Again, this is the book I read from Was I Ever Normal by Becca Pava. If you're looking to read it, has 8 5-star reviews on Amazon. I have other YouTube videos where I read from it. It also has reviews all over the internet. It has a press release. It was in the LA Times Festival of Books. And it was featured in the Barnes and Noble store in August of 2022. They did a special feature. So I'll stop here. Love all you guys so much. Thanks for watching. Bye.